The Alberta oil sands, the Saudi Arabia of the North. It's the second largest oil deposit on Earth.
America is addicted to oil, which is often imported from unstable parts of the world.
With skyrocketing gas prices, U.S. demand is spurring a five-fold increase in this once unprofitable development.
Canada has become America's #1 source of imported oil.
Billions of dollars are being invested to build the world's largest industrial project on a landmass nearly the size of Florida.
Foreign workers are flooding into the overcrowded boomtown of Fort McMurray in search of unprecedented wealth. Ancient forests are cleared to make way for large open-pit mines. Heavy oil is separated from the sand with chemicals and steam, then refined into crude oil.
The byproduct is billions of barrels of wastewater collected into vast toxic tailings ponds. It is also what's turning Canada into one of the biggest emitters of greenhouse gases.
Running through the oil sands is the Athabasca River, the lifeblood of the native communities downstream.
How long have you lived here? How long have you lived in Mackay?
Oh, I was born in Asia.
How old are you now?
69.
So you could be an example. You could be a living example to people out here, especially to young people, if you were to quit drinking and smoking.
But I never used to drink when I got married.
I know, but now,
Yeah.
you know all the problems.
Now,
You know all the
yes.
problems that are happening out here.
Yeah.
Can you imagine other people that might be thinking about it if they see that you've been able to do it, you've managed to do it?
Mm-hmm.
That will give them great encouragement, right?
Right.
Are you ready to do it?
Sure I will.
Okay, thank you. So I will put, what I'll do, I'll just phone the pharmacy. And as soon as Dr. Sauvé contacts me, I'm going to call you directly. And I'll let you know. And you'll have hopefully been on this medication for a month and you won't be drinking.
Yeah.
Right? And you should feel wonderful.
Sure.
Okay?
Okay.
Good.
That sounds good.
Here's your cane. You know, I remember not too long ago when you wanted to hit me with that. Do you remember that?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I remember everything.
So I'll see you back in a month.
Okay.
Right, but I'll be in touch with you anyway after I
And
speak
don't
to
pull around on me.
I won't fool around.
Flirting with my husband again.
So you're honest.
I will, yeah, and faithful. Faithful to the end, okay?
Behave yourself.
When I went into practice initially, I was quickly fascinated by native culture. On arrival in Fort Chip, I was mindful of the fact that I had to gain the respect and trust of the elders. I was struck by the isolation and the beauty, actually, of the location of Fort Chip, sitting as it is on the north shore of the west end of Lake Athabasca. I was so very impressed by the eloquence of the people.
Fort Chipewyan is an isolated community. Our people have lived in the delta around Fort Chipewyan for probably about 12,000 years, if not more. And the land for the people is their life. The water is their life. And we rely on the water for hunting and fishing and transportation and for drinking. It's our subsistence.
The elders believe that it's our inherent right to look after the gifts that the Creator gave us, which is the water, the animals. They're there for us. We don't take more than what we need. And it's our inherent right to pass this on to our children and to the future generations.
I was very fascinated by the descriptions that the elders gave to me of their overview of things over the past couple of decades as it happened in Fort Chip, especially their descriptions of the changes that they had seen in the environment, the falling population of some of the small animals that they trapped and hunted for. They were not able to hunt as successfully as what they had in years gone by, and they linked their health to these changes. They felt that the community's overall health had deteriorated, and they consistently connected that with the changes they'd seen, for instance, in the water.
These ropes are all in place. Oh, I gotta put the plug in here. You want to launch without that. Done that before. I lived in Chip most of my life here. We used to live off the land, really lots. Ducks, geese was in abundance. Like there used to be hundreds of thousands of them flying over. And now, well, lucky if I seen 100 this year. It's just sad. I guess it's mostly the pollution in the air that bothers them. And when they do land, like they're really sensitive. The feed, the food chain, it's all messed up too. And now when you kill an animal or a bird, you gotta check the organs. You gotta make sure it's all right before you take it home, because lots of it's no good.
I went out to go hunt some ducks, gave a few of them to Mom, who is 85 years old. She just threw them out after she cooked one. She said, it just doesn't taste the same. So, the people down south don't believe us, she said. Well, they better, because we've seen the changes. I'd like to take you back maybe 20 years ago, let's say 1988. There was not very much of concern then. As soon as the development started occurring in the Fort McMurray area, in the oil sands area, it was more of a concern to us because we see the changes in our food supplies, and how they taste it. I've witnessed it myself, so I also used to trap out there and, spent some time out there, so I can tell you that for sure there is some change. What Suncor came out with here a couple of years back on their hearings with the Energy and Utilities Board regarding arsenic that's being let out from their plant, they were pretty well, open about it. So that put a scare in all the people here. And now people are very, very, reluctant to eat fish.
For all the years I had fish, I never seen things like the last 10 years what happened with fish with, deformed, twisted faces, humpbacks, crooked tails on them, sores on the side. They're not fit for human consumption. There's something in this water that's destroying our fish.
I worked industry, Syncrude, 15 years, and that was good. I made some big dollars. And I started off driving trucks, then worked my way up, graders, dozers, onto the shovels, day shift, night shift, right to the top pretty well, I guess. A little supervising and stuff like that. Then my health started getting bad.
So you don't regret it at all?
Not really, except for my lungs now. They're bad. I really struggle. I can't, exert myself. Then I need to breathe hard. I have to stop, and it's a bummer, I can't do much. So, how are you? You look good.
Thank you.
So everything is going well? As I became familiar with the patients I was seeing in Fort Chip, there was a number of people that had been previously diagnosed with, quite serious illnesses, like especially various types of cancers. It surprised me because I felt that a community situated as it was should be healthier. In 2002-2003, I saw my first case of a bile duct cancer that I was familiar with. The cancer is called cholangiocarcinoma. It's very aggressive generally. My dad passed away 6 weeks to the day after he'd first presented with symptoms. This occurs at a rate of 1 in 100,000 population. I was dealing with 1,200 people in Fort Chip. It could happen probably or possibly purely through chance. The gentleman actually is now deceased. Shortly after that, I saw a second case, an older gentleman. He was not well enough, unfortunately, to be operated on and did not last very long. But there was one other biopsy-positive case of cholangiocarcinoma. I'm sure I've seen 3 other cases, which I think is very significant for that size of the population.
This greatly disturbed John, and he thought, this is not right, there's something wrong. He started to do what a good community doctor does, is he advocates for the people that he treats. And so we started to ask both federal and provincial scientists, why am I seeing the things that I'm seeing? Why am I seeing such elevated rates of lupus, elevated rates of colon cancer, of bile duct cancer, and other diseases? And that got John into a lot of trouble. As a result of asking those questions, John got hammered. And John got hammered by both the federal government and the provincial government. And he got hammered in the most unusual way. Alberta Health, Health Canada, and Environment Canada filed charges against John before the College of Physicians and Surgeons in Alberta. And the charges were extraordinary. They accused him of causing undue alarm in the community by talking about these cancers. They accused him of double billing and irresponsible practices. There were 6 or 8 charges there. A lot of the charges were just pure attempts to assassinate the character of a beloved physician.
I was shocked. I felt the issue of raising undue alarm. It seemed a little odd because I wasn't aware of any alarm in the community.
For the governments of Canada and the governments of Alberta to accuse him of causing undue alarm when both governments have failed to do proper health studies in the region, it's simply outrageous. As a journalist, I've never heard ever of a physician being accused of causing undue alarm in a community because he's asked questions about the level and rareness of diseases he's finding in the community. I think this is unprecedented.
There was no clear and convincing proof that there was undue alarm in Fort Chip. There's absolutely no evidence that John raised. He was just a messenger. And when you get a college complaint, it's the license at stake. It's an all-out threat to one's livelihood. When you start to go up against oiled money, it gets dangerous very quickly.
They were after him. They're trying to take his license away from him. They threatened him and all that, and that's shameful what they did. He's a doctor, and he's trying to save people.
Dr. O'Connor thought that there might be a link between environmental contaminants and these diseases. And having made myself familiar with the levels of contaminants in the river and in wildlife and in the sediments, that position of Dr. O'Connor made sense to me.
I think we need to be fair about this and take a look at the Athabasca River, how it developed. You can see bitumen running out of the banks of the Athabasca River on a hot summer day and running into the river. It's been going on for millennia, and it's not as if we're dumping oil in the river and no one else is doing anything. Mother Nature has done that for decades and eons. The regulatory arrangements around the water are very stringent. I mean, if you want to compare our water quality arrangements and regulations with any other jurisdiction, I would suggest that we would stack up very well.
The industry does monitor, but governments also monitor on a regular basis the air quality and the water quality, both upstream and downstream of the plants.
The tests that we've done and continually test and retest the river water, we actually don't find that there's a contribution of degradation in river water quality from industrial establishment.
The government actually gathers very little of its own data now. They've devolved that over time such that most of the information that the government gets is actually from industry.
About a decade ago, I did a preliminary study of this with Alberta Environment, of 2 or 3 of the river systems that are now being mined, and we found preliminary evidence that there were pulses of acid going into the river. We proposed to do a more intensive study. Study still hasn't been done. Industry's answer to us was that it would cost too much.
The truth of the matter is that most of the operations that are using water at the moment to produce bitumen, 90% plus of that water can be recycled, and in many cases is.
What's dumped into the tailings pond is a witch's brew of water, clay, silt, and naphthenic acid. Tar sands are not standard oil. They are full of all sorts of very nasty things that we do not want in our world. We know that the tailings ponds are leaking. We know that there have been many large spills of bitumen or industrial wastewater into the river system. Tar Island Pond 1 is perhaps the best studied of the tailings ponds, and it's been documented that the pond leaks at a rate of about 5.7 million liters per day and has for many, many years. The pond was built really at a time when they didn't think far enough into the future about, is it wise to place an extremely toxic tailings pond immediately adjacent to a major river? I've spoken with environmental officers for the Alberta government who have been frustrated to tears because they have filed reports, have caught polluters year in, year out, and nothing ever happens. It gets to a certain point at the political level and they kill the investigation.
John and his wife Charlene left Fort McMurray in the fall of 2007, and they left because they really couldn't take the craziness any longer.
The very last day in Fort Chip, I was told on the morning that the community wanted to have a sort of going away community meal at the community hall. And so at lunchtime I walked out into the waiting room and it was full, as many as could fit into the waiting room of the nursing station. And I was presented with several things and then this. And I was like a blubbering fool. This is the community wrapping itself around me. This is exactly what it is. Each individual that I look at and remember, you know, was that little experience, was that moment or that encounter, and this is everything stitched together. We want to make sure that we're looking after this community in Nova Scotia. At some point, we would certainly consider returning to Fort Chip on a regular basis.
I'm gonna have a puff here. Where's this story? Oh, here we go. Here's a story about a good Dr. O'Connor, tar wires, about industry and the effects that's happened with the people in Chip and struggling and with their lifestyles and with the cancers and the diseases. And it's an 8-page read. It's a good read. And I'm in there.
From where we sit downstream from oil sands activities, Fort Chipewyan is probably the community that has the most at stake. We want to find some answers in terms of why is there such a disproportionate amount of cancers in a small community of 1,200 people. Every incident that was investigated by the Alberta government in collaboration with a company concluded that there was no impact to the Athabasca River. We didn't buy that. We don't buy any of the results or studies that they come and report to the community of Fort Chipewyan.
The community contacted me and said, we would like you to do a study of the contaminants in our water, in our sediment, in our wildlife, and tell us the truth, because they felt for a very long time that they hadn't been told the truth. The study was in part new data we gathered from water and sediment. What I did was I gathered data from many different sources that really hadn't been analyzed before, crunched the numbers, and lo and behold, there were some worrisome patterns that started to jump out at me.
A quick overview of what we found. For people who eat locally caught fish, the health risk to you is greater than the Alberta government has told you.
There's a very clear link between arsenic and many of the kinds of diseases that you have in your community, that this is a red flag item that really needs to be studied in some greater detail. The mercury in the fishes is really quite high, and in many of the fish species it's well above what would be considered a safe level to eat. The people in the community who eat a lot of fish were virtually unaware of this, even though Health Canada and Alberta Health and Wellness has said, well, we told the community this is nothing new. That's really not the impression that the people of Fort Chipewyan gave me. They said, this is shocking.
We've been losing the elders for a number of years now, right down to young people now. We just lost one beautiful young man here at the age of 28 this past summer with a rare cancer. That kid was so kind to everyone, you know, the elders and all. So that was a big loss to the community too, you know. And then everyone that dies here is a loss to the community.
Their tone was stern, their message clear. For some, this rally was an emotional plea to solve a problem they say is killing their community.
He fought hard. He fought right to the bitter end. But at the end, I guess the disease was too overpowering, too deadly for him that he couldn't fight anymore.
Less than 2 months ago, Steve Cotterell buried his 28-year-old nephew. He died of a rare form of cancer. His uncle and hundreds of others here believe is linked to oil sands projects upstream.
How many more of our young people need to die before somebody wakes up?
Today, demonstrators slammed the provincial Tories for ignoring Fort Chipewyan's pleas, calling for an end to new oil sands projects until the health impact is clearly understood.
We certainly are paying attention, and will continue to work with the people in that community to try to mitigate and address any of those types of circumstances that they face.
Alberta's Liberals say tainted water leaked from an oil sands plant into the Athabasca River was kept secret for months. The opposition released a report today saying the leak from Suncor's wastewater pond happened last fall and that residents downstream were not told about it until 2 weeks ago.
I don't know when they were told, and that's one of the things I want to find out for sure is were the people notified, and again, what was the level of toxicity, if there was any.
The Liberals say the leak was the same volume as an Olympic-sized swimming pool and included water contaminated with oil and grease.
Suncor, as a company, has agreed to come to the community and to talk to you about and to report and communicate to you the details of some of these incidences. We've asked them to do that for the past 5 years, and they've agreed to do that, and thank you.
What we're telling you is true, and that we're hearing you, and that if you're telling us to do things differently, then we do it differently. Like, tell us how we can do that better.
I'm afraid to even get my baby to drink the water. The day I've had her or brought her home, she hasn't touched the water at all. She's had bottled water, which is unacceptable because I don't want my baby to go like I've lost family members. What's gonna happen around her? The environment that she's gonna be growing up in. That's my concern.
We've lost a lot of people. We bury people all the time. And the government still gives out their licenses. You should be ashamed of yourself.
This is a very hard place to be. I've heard more tonight than I have heard in the last 10 years about how you feel about how things are going right now.
The industry is coming here to destroy the indigenous people on this area. People from all over the world are coming here, destroying our land. The animals are dying, people are dying. It's enough. That has to be stopped by 80 meetings necessary. And we are not going to wait any longer. Aye, aye.
We're a small little community, you know, we're the Davids. Now we're going to the Goliaths of government and industry. You know, it's, how do you even begin?
Athabasca runs cold, runs cold. The river through the Athabasca runs cold, runs cold.
Who are you seeing today, John, in Fort McCry?
I don't know. One of the nice things about it is it's always a surprise. You never know who's going to be there.
What's up, Doc?
How are you?
Good. No, well, actually not good. That's why I'm here to see you.
No, sorry. You said good. You can't go back in the...
Okay, good then. I have the same problem last time I came to see you. I'm coughing a lot, I'm sneezing. When I cough, it's a dry cough and I just want to...
I have a feeling this is not asthma. I think it's probably all in your sinuses, and that accounts for it going on for so long. So we'll use a nasal spray, and I'm going to see if I can get a strong decongestant for you. Something like what Dr. Nawak...
John was able to provide great service through telehealth. He's able to support the community with regular weekly telehealth clinics, and then every 6 weeks coming back to maintain that in-person presence. John's provided that support by 24/7 phone availability is amazing. I mean, most people wouldn't think of offering that kind of service. He does it, and he does it patiently, even temperately. It's just amazing.
We're going to get some tests done on you.
That's all, folks. From all our perspectives, what we should be doing is putting people first. Take a lesson from what's happening in Fort Chip, and realizing that the price of this absolute unabated development that's going on, not just in the tar sands but all over the world, is perhaps getting to be too big a price to pay.
I think most people think everything is probably okay, whereas the closer you get to Fort Chipewyan and the closer you get to the Athabasca River, the more you learn about the system, the more concerned you are about the future.
There are so many. It's a very broad question, and and in this case, I don't think the company would be Suncor. It would be Syncrude. But the communities have many questions about the scale of the operation, the public health implications of these operations, and there are many things happening at different places. But in general, most of the issues raised in the film have still not been adequately resolved or adequately investigated by government authorities.
And yes, Maple Grove, you are next.
Hi, I want to say great documentary, and also
What do they do with the food supply? Do they still fish there and like get their meat there, or do they like have to supplement? Like, what do they do?
If I can talk here, I don't know if George is on the line, but yeah, as far as I know, a lot of people are still, hunting and trapping to the best of their ability, but know that there are dangers there. But obviously there's regular markets and things, and people are buying bottled water now, so, and they have been for a while. In fact, government officials bring in cases of bottled water when they come in for meetings up in Fort Chip because they know they can't drink that water there.
And actually, if I can just add to that, when the community did their own investigation of the environment in 2007, Health Canada, on the strength of Dr. Kevin Timoney's findings, issued an advisory for pregnant women and children not to eat fish from the lake, and anybody else not to do so more than once a week or do so at their own risk. Families were also advised that they should keep their children away from the water. And Lake Athabasca, of course, is their playground, so it's a huge loss to the community. But unfortunately, because of 80% of the community is subsisting on traditional ways, they continue to, at a large degree, consume at least some of the fish. And I guess in some ways hope that they don't come to any sort of grief health-wise with their activities. There's no choice, unfortunately.
And the next question, please. Yes, Chris Wood. Okay, so Chris Wood, if you could ask your question first, and then we'll go to Maple Grove.
Okay, sorry, I was okay. So I'm still asking my question. There's reference in the documentary to what are referred to as documented ongoing leaks from, I believe, one of the older ponds, and then a later reference to what sounds like an individual leak. Can I assume that at least one of the ponds continues to leak on an ongoing basis? And can you point me to where those documents might be available at all?
I think that's yours, Andrew.
Hi, Chris. It's Andrew Nikifork in Calgary. There is been a very ongoing investigation at the Tar Island Dike, which was the first large dam built back in 1965. It has been leaking for more than 30 years. One of the major investigators in seepage from this dike in the last couple of years has been a fellow by the name of Dave Rudolph at the University of Waterloo. And he just published a study on his findings, I think it was in December. And basically what they found is that the seepage today is not as great as it used to be 20 to 30 years ago, but there is still ongoing seepage. And one of the big issues really is that there are more than 24 ponds in the region that if you put them all together, they would cover the entire area occupied by the city of Vancouver. We're talking about 6 billion barrels of toxic waste on the landscape. And although individual companies are doing groundwater monitoring around many of these incredible dams, none of this information is public. The Cambridge Energy Associates, Research Associates in Boston, Massachusetts, which is a big oil analyst group run by Daniel Yergin, in their report on the oil sands last year, made a pointed comment about the fact that all of these dams are unlined and that there is no public data on the volume of leakage or seepage from these ponds. So, in some, we have evidence of leakage from one pond into the Athabasca River, and that the seepage rate has declined over time as they are getting ready to reclaim this pond and seal it up. And we have virtually no public data on what's happening with the other ponds.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next person to ask our question is Maple Grove. Go ahead, Maple Grove.
My question is, why does the U.S. have to get their oil from us?
Well, the main reason is that we're right next door to safe oil supply, and there's pipelines that come down through from Canada all throughout the Great Lakes region. BP is one of the top refiners of oil sands here in the U.S. It's just a safe oil supply. Evan Nicofor can talk about this as well. But the resources are dwindling in the U.S., and this is going to be an ongoing, steady source, but it's far more environmentally devastating.
Yeah, Canada is now the #1 supplier of oil to the United States and has been for about 10 years. So 20% of the oil used in the United States now is coming from Canada. And of that 20% that is coming from Canada, about 12% is coming directly from the tar sands. Most of the synthetic crude and bitumen is going to the U.S. Midwest. So states like Illinois and Minnesota, North Dakota, Wisconsin are heavily dependent on oil coming from Canada. And the Americans are now using less and less oil from places like Saudi Arabia, more and more from Canada. The United States stopped being self-sufficient in oil production back in the 1970s. So the Americans have lots of concerns about their addiction to oil, the volume of oil they're using, the uncertain and political and importing this oil from politically risky regions, and they see Canada as a source of lots of oil, as well as being a friendly nation.
Okay, so there was a previous question from Louis St. Laurent that some of the First Nations people must have worked for the oil industry. How did the First Nations people feel towards these people in their community? And it was answered by Dr. John O'Connor. He said that First Nations have a love-hate relationship with the industry. While financially benefiting from the tar sands, they increasingly are aware and more vocal about their concerns for the obvious disastrous effects on the land, and it appears their health. There's another question about what is Dave's last name, the University of Waterloo researcher. So anybody who was curious, that name was Dave Rudolph. Okay, so the next question would be from Gary Baldy, and he asked, it sounds like once again the multinationals are directing the show. How can we as citizens have a voice or impact this issue to attempt to help the community change things and get things cleaned up?
I don't know who you're directing this question at, but obviously this has been an issue people have been dealing with for a while now, trying to get the government officials, Health Canada, various agencies to deal with this. So I'm not up in Canada, I'm not up in Alberta, so I'm not following all the time, all the day in and day out events. But John, you are back and forth to Fort McKay quite often and Fort McMurray. Do you want to comment on this?
Sorry, my audio was gone. I disconnected completely for some reason. I presume the government probably did that. Anyway, I didn't catch the question. Can you repeat that?
Nicole, do you want to just ask the question again and John can answer it?
Sure. Gary Baldy says, it sounds like once again the multinationals are directing the show. How can we as citizens have a voice or impact this issue to attempt to help the community change things and get things cleaned up? And I'm also just going to read the answer from Andrew Nikiforuk, and he said that Canadian citizens need to ask more questions about fiscal accountability and how the oil wealth is being spent. Most Canadians are not aware that Canada now supplies the U.S. with 20% of its oil, and most do not know that the majority of this bitumen will be shipped raw without upgrading in Canada. And by the way, Garibaldi says they are a school.
From my perspective as a family physician and seeing the obvious results of what's happening in northern Alberta and by extension in many parts of this country, I think we must put pressure on our elected representatives. They must hear our voice. One of the things I was told in Fort Chip, probably in 2007, 2008, 2 years into what we're doing roughly, was that they had tried for years to have their concerns heard, and they said that at the point where the media sort of learned of the story and they started to gain attention and gain government interest because of media pressure, their comments were, now we have a voice. If everyone spoke up, wherever you're living, if you contact your representative and say, we do not like what's happening, we want some response from the government in terms of what's happening with the peoples of northern Canada. Why are people being exposed to what they're being exposed to for the sake of big oil? I think that's the only way we can do it. I mean, being concerned and addressing the issues at your own level, there will be a tsunami of pressure put on especially the federal government. Obviously, the Alberta government has no interest in addressing issues whatsoever. Having watched the documentary again and listened to Mel Knight and his spoutings, it's nauseating. So just simply make phone calls, write letters, set up a petition. Let's put a petition around the country to every school in the country. And let's make some waves, because it does work and it will work.
Okay, so Andrew Nikiforuk also says that the project generates enormous amounts of royalties for the province and taxes for the federal government. And as a result, Alberta is a petro-state much like Saudi Arabia. Oil revenue also explains why the federal government is not terribly interested in climate change. Canada's record on reducing carbon emissions and acting on global warming is as poor as Saudi Arabia. Oil-producing nations generally do not support science that calls for a reduction in fossil fuels. And Leslie Irick says that citizens should be active in writing to their government officials, speaking out and protesting the issue at hand. No one deserves to be a victim of large corporations who are exploiting the natural environment, and as a result, citizens downstream from the oil sands, we can all stop buying oil from companies who are exploiting. Post your feelings on the Twitter page, and she provides the link there. And Andrew says the fish with two mouths is a natural thing and has nothing to do with pollution from the oil sands. Okay, thanks for letting me know that, Andrew, because I thought it had something to do with that. And the next question will be from Louis St. Laurent.
Okay, there are actually several questions that I'd like to take up right now. First of them is, as far as company and community interaction that we see at Port Chapoin, what is the usual protocol? Like, how does the company communicate to the community from like day to day, week to week, however?
This might be best answered by Andrew.
I wonder if you could actually repeat the question. I'm sorry. I didn't quite hear the last bit of it.
Okay. As far as company and community interaction, so with the petro companies and the community of Port Chapoin, how do the two interact? How do they exchange information? How does the information go from point A to point B on a regular basis?
Well, the communication varies over time, and it depends on what the issue is. Quite often the communication has to deal with upcoming projects, or companies will inform the community about expansions to existing projects that might affect Aboriginal lands. Sometimes the conversations are solely about money and money arrangements and employment opportunities. So there's a variety of forums, but the quality of communication is not always good. You often have people talking past each other rather than to each other. I mean, when Suncor, when it came clean on a number of violations of that had occurred in terms of putting polluted water into the Athabasca River, were very uncomfortable in reporting this news directly to the people of Fort Chip, and they weren't experienced at doing this sort of thing, and they don't have the kind of ongoing ties that they should have to be able to have effective dialogue about a lot of these issues. And this is one of the big major issues in oil sands generally, is that you tend to have industry monologues and government monologues, and you don't really have real ongoing constructive conversations between local communities and the companies. And this has been an issue up there for a long time.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Nickelford. Next question is, for priority, which one, the open-ended question, which one should be prioritized? Cleaning up the tailings, the effects on the environment from the tailing pond seepage, or providing solutions to the health systems, and also the systems of communication that are currently in place. So which one should be prioritized? The environmental system or the communication and interaction systems?
Well, I think probably one of the most important environmental issues that has to be addressed, and has to be addressed speedily, would be the volume of toxic waste that is accumulated in the tailings ponds over time. This is one of the greatest liabilities to both industry, government, and taxpayers. Again, we're talking about 6 billion barrels of toxic waste, and it all has to do with the fact that when you are processing bitumen and you are washing the sand that bitumen is trapped in with hot water, you separate the bitumen and the sand quite easily, but the clays stick to the water molecules. And as a result, for every barrel of bitumen that you make, you have about 1.5 barrels of this clay-based slurry that's much like ketchup. And dewatering it has, is an enormous chemical puzzle and problem. The financial liabilities of these toxic ponds right now, I mean, just the cost of dewatering them alone would be in excess of somewhere between 10 and $20 billion, and that's a conservative estimate. So this is the issue that really needs to be addressed very, very quickly. The Alberta government has come up with new guidelines and new rules that might force some companies to go to a dry tailings process by 2013. In other words, the government of Alberta has said, look, by 2013, you can't, 50% of the sludge that you are creating will have to be dry and will have to be able to be turned into soil for reclaimed ground by 2013. Now, only one company so far has said that they can meet that standard, and that's Suncor, and the rest of the companies operating in the region have said, no, it might take us as long as 40 years. But that's probably the major issue that really needs to be seriously addressed. One of the big issues right now about the tailings ponds has to do with sour gas. The ponds are emitting, this is a very potent neurotoxin, very deadly gas, and sour gas exceedances around the ponds have climbed in the region from about 60 a year to more than 500 a year. This is a serious public health issue in the region.
Okay, thank you very much. Last question is, what kinds of long-term effects after tar sands cleanup, everything's cleaned up, can we expect to see any influence environments and populations?
Andrew, do you have some info on this through your book, Tar Sands?
Well, I mean, the long-term implications are many. We have an acid rain problem that is now appearing in northern Saskatchewan, in lakes of northern Saskatchewan as a result from air pollution. We have recent studies that have indicated that particulate matter and bitumen in air pollution is now landing in snow, that this melts in the springtime and creates a substantial oil spill on the Athabasca River that then goes down into Lake Athabasca. We have issues about the long-term use of groundwater in the region by the steam plants, and so there are an extraordinary number of long-term issues for the entire region. What's interesting is that at this point in time, neither the federal government nor the provincial government nor industry has ever put together a cumulative impact statement that would say, look, 3 million barrels a day is going to impact the air, the land, and the water in this way. 5 million barrels will do this. 2 million barrels will do this. Those studies have not yet been done.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome. There are any number of solutions that communities and ordinary citizens need to bring up. The first is fiscal accountability. This has to do with the money that the governments make from this project. Is this money being collected fairly? Is it being saved for future generations? Is the government running on taxes from citizens as opposed to oil revenue from oil companies? If the government is running on oil revenue, then it will represent the project and the development of the project over time, and not citizens. We need a proper public health study, obviously, that addresses the concerns of the community of Fort Chip. So that's something else that citizens need to ask for. I think we also need to ask for a slowdown of this project. The more money and poured into this project, the greater the liabilities will become for all of us, in particular if oil demand goes up and down and becomes increasingly volatile over time. So there's lots lots of issues that people can address and write their MLAs about.
Okay, so the next question we'll take will be from Maple Grove. Sorry for the wait, Maple Grove. If people could just ask one question and then get into the lineup again, that would be good. Thanks.
I know that people who live in Chippewan drink bottled water, but do they shower in the same water that's contaminated?
Yes, they shower in the water that comes from the water treatment plant. In fact, the municipality that runs the water treatment plant reassures the community that that water is okay. And so they have, I guess, gotten that level of reassurance. But there's still huge concerns and huge doubts given the relative lack of interest in government agencies to actually pay attention to the concerns of the people that live in Port Chip. So they do, and they brush their teeth, and they continue to try to continue living as normally as possible. But there's a huge sense of concern and more sometimes among people in that community. Bottled water, though, is pretty much everywhere for drinking and consumption.
Yeah, that is concerning. I've been hearing a fair bit actually recently about how your body absorbs like impurities from the water and chemicals when you're in the shower. The next question is from Alana Dawn, and she says, when we write our letters and contact our MLAs, what solutions should we call for?
That's yours, Andrew, I think.
Yeah, I think I already answered that question.
Sorry. So we can go to Louis St. Laurent then.
Okay, so what exactly are the chances that the wildlife will recover, and how long do you think that'll take?
Well, a good question. It depends on what kind of wildlife you're talking about. These projects are so large, they affect an extraordinarily large area in the boreal forest. And so we know that the mines themselves will, over time, destroy the habitat for really millions of boreal songbirds. We know that the steam plants will also fragment the forest with pipelines and roads and well pads, and that will have a dramatic effect on woodland caribou. Just about every facet of development here affects some form of wildlife. And again, nobody's really done the proper studies to really find out, well, how much wildlife will be displaced, and wildlife will be displaced over time, and we don't even know yet how waterfowl migrations will be affected over time. Ducks and geese fly over Fort McMurray on their way to Lake Athabasca and the Lake Athabasca Delta. Very rich, wonderful area for waterfowl. And again, we know that this project has disrupted a lot of that activity. We don't know what the long-term effects will be. So all that we can say at this point in time is that there have been wildlife sacrifices, that this project does have an impact on fish, it does have an impact on woodland caribou, does have an impact on bears and lynx and wolves, and does have an impact on boreal songbirds. But to quantify it over time, we really haven't done that research yet. And for some aspects of the project, it's possible that over 100, 200, 300 years, the forest will heal and that some of the wildlife will come back, but that will all depend on a number of factors. In particular, climate change. It will depend on how well we reclaim the land. We know that we're not going to be able to restore a lot of the wetlands, which are a really critical part of the area. Really, 50% of the area now being mined was at one time wetlands, and we really just don't know how to recreate those landscapes.
And George says that the community of Fort Chipewyan believes the municipality should do more rigorous testing versus the standard test, considering there are issues related to water quality in the Athabasca River and Athabasca Lake. Concerned individuals in putting pressures on your MLAs in relation to Fort Chipewyan issues should be putting pressures on government to respect Fort Chipewyan treaty rights, supporting the request for a baseline health study, supporting a local community-based monitoring program, and supporting a moratorium on any new approvals. Dr. Don O'Connor says Fort McKay, which is upstream of Fort Chipewyan and on the banks of the Athabasca, will not touch anything fish or water from the Athabasca. And the next question will come from Maple Grove.
Is it possible that the pollutants may get into the ocean? And if possible, and if it does, what would happen?
Well, if pollutants get to the ocean, first of all, it's a possibility. And in order for an enormous amount of pollutants to get to the ocean, one of these large tailing ponds would have to break. Now, these tailings ponds are among the world's largest dams. They are all world-class dams. Some of them are even larger than the Aswan Dam on the Nile River in Egypt. The Mildred Lake Settling Basin, which is run by Syncrude, is the world's second largest dam in terms of construction material volume. So then the Three Gorges Dam in China, which is the world's largest dam. If one of those dams then were to break, the material and the sludge would all of it could go into the Athabasca River, and it would create a slick that would go to Lake Athabasca, and eventually would find its way into the Mackenzie River, and the Mackenzie River would then empty a lot of this stuff into the Beaufort Sea in the Arctic. If this were to happen, the Mackenzie River Basin Board, which really looks at the health of the whole Mackenzie River Basin, which is Canada's is North America's third largest watershed, it has described such an event would be catastrophic. It would release much more oil and naphthenic acids and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons into the river than, let's say, the Exxon Valdez released into Prince William Sound on the ocean. So it would be a very tragic and catastrophic event. Otherwise, we don't really know at this point in time how much material is seeping from the tailings ponds. We know there's some, but it doesn't seem to be at this point a lot. Although there's no transparency about those studies. But an enormous amount of pollution and contamination is now actually getting into the river as the result of air pollution. And this air pollution settles in the snow, as I said, and then it melts in the spring and creates a pulse of contaminated bitumen that runs into the Athabasca River. And it's equivalent to about an oil spill of around 6,000, 5,000 barrels a year. And so if this happens every year, we would have the equivalent of an Exxon Valdez in Lake Athabasca within 50 years. So this is a major concern, and again, one that really needs to be seriously addressed by the government of Alberta as well as Environment Canada.
And then Christy Goodell asked that she presumes that water quality testing has been done in the river near Fort Chipewyan. Is it possible to compare this to what is found through water testing near the tailings ponds? And George has said that communities all the way down the Mackenzie watershed, which is downstream from Fort McMurray and Fort Chipewyan, and ends up in the Arctic Ocean, are concerned about tar sands pollution of their waters too. So do any of you know if any testing has been done to compare near the tailings ponds to compared to other parts of the river?
John or Andrew, do you want to talk about Dr. Schindler's recent findings at all?
Yeah, briefly, I mean, David Schindler has done some studies, and what he's one study which has now been published, and this was the study that found that, you know, approximately 600 tons of bitumen is being deposited within a 50-kilometer radius of the upgraders in the region on snow, and that, you know, in the springtime, this stuff, when the snow melts, you have a pulse of bitumen oil and other stuff getting into the river, and this is quite significant. Syncrude has 186 monitoring stations around its tailings ponds, and they have approximately 21 tailings ponds altogether. But there's no public information about you know, the seepage and leakage from those ponds into the river or into groundwater. So we don't know. The best data that we've had so far has all come from Dr. Schindler's study, and Dr. Schindler will be releasing another study probably within a month's time that will be looking at really the number of heavy metals that are getting into the river and what the probable sources of those metals might be from oil sands operations north of Fort McMurray.
Okay, and the next question will be from Louis St. Laurent. I'd originally said that we would need to be off at 11:55 our time. I have confirmed with the person who does our webinars that we can stay a little bit longer due to the fact that not as many participants as expected are on. But if people need to leave, that is okay, we understand. If some people want to stay and discuss, then that's possible as well. Okay, so a question from Louis St. Laurent.
So assuming that it's cheaper for oil companies to pay their fines or penalties when they're found to be polluting the environment, should the government fines be substantially greater in order, which will encourage oil companies to invest in technology to clean up the problem to begin with?
Perhaps that's a question that you could answer, George, since I know Andrew needs to leave.
I think, you know, I can make a comment on this while George is trying to answer. You know, they had that recent issue with the duck death. Syncrude's oil toxic pond had 600 original ducks that were considered dead, and then it went up to like 1,200 or 1,400. They're now back in court. They pleaded not guilty. The government did raise fines on this, but you know, it's nebulous to say how much the government's going to enforce these agencies, because the government makes money on these agencies, right? So I think the larger the fines, the more pressure the government puts on them as an outside entity, the better. We'll see what happens in court as an example of this with Syncrude, and if they get off scot-free, that will be an interesting answer to how much pressure government puts on the agencies.
George O'Connor says the government really needs to elevate penalties. Government of Alberta and Canada environmental penalties and standards are one of the weakest in the world. I want to go back to some of the comments that Dr. John O'Connor has made and read them for everyone. Dr. David Schindler has revealed that 11,000 metric tons of PAHs are contaminating the river every 3 months, so that's like a major oil spill annually. And he also says that the government immediately denied the study findings, saying their data doesn't support the Schindler findings, yet the government has not produced one shred of evidence to support their assertions. And George Pushis also says that otherwise industries like Syncrude getting a $800,000 penalty is really a slap on the wrist and nothing else. So we have a question up here from Maple Grove, and they were wondering if we were going to have a webinar about the Dirty Oil movie. We would have to check with Bubblegum about that. The rates might be different because it is a feature film, so it might be something like people would have to purchase the movie or something like that, perhaps, and then we could have the webinar. We may not have the same rates to show it over the webinar like this documentary, but we'd need to talk to Bubblegum about that. Dr. John O'Connor says, and the fine will likely be a tax break. And Downstream Film Panel Discussion wants to ask Dr. John O'Connor, what are PAHs?
PAHs are polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, volatile substances that are produced in the process of mining tar sands. Very, very difficult to capture them. You can't sort of test blood for these, but you can see the evidence of the effects on environment, wildlife, and humans. They are highly carcinogenic, cancer-causing, and can be linked with several of the cancer issues that have arisen or that have been confirmed in the community for CHIP.
Teresa had asked a previous question, have there been any response from the oil industry or government regarding this study? That was the study that Dr. Schindler conducted, and Dr. John O'Connor has responded in regard to the government. Does the oil industry respond to any of these types of studies, though?
You probably could answer this, George. Well, I'll just take a stab at it. Oh, sorry, George is answering there.
So George says Dr. Schindler's study really called into question the effectiveness of the government and industry monitoring programs called the Regional Aquatics Monitoring Program. And Dr. John O'Connor, you had something to say as well?
Yeah, that particular program, RAMP, as we call it, has been totally discredited and has been producing nothing in terms of scientific evidence to suggest that what they claim, that there is no impact on the environment, especially on the water. And that's been actually an issue that's been confirmed by independent, impartial, respected scientists, many of whom have been retained by the Alberta government for various investigations over the years. So it's a totally sort of unpoliced and unmonitored situation. In fact, you know, industry and government confirm that industry itself reports to government. So basically, it is akin to someone walking into a police station the morning after they've been drunk driving and telling the policeman, you know, arrest me, I was drunk driving last night. It's a very, very bizarre situation that leaves the health of whole communities of people in the north open to, I guess, cynically, the price of oil.
Okay, so Oh, George says RAMP is funded 100% by industry and supported by government. So if there are no more questions, then I think that we will wrap up.
Leslie, do you want to do a little summary from your perspective?
Sure. Well, I appreciate everybody's interest in coming to this webinar and watching the movie and asking all these great questions. I think it's an important topic that everyone needs to get involved with, certainly everybody that's living up there in that area. And being from the U.S., I think it's important. I take a responsibility being an American because this is where we get the majority of our oil, so that's why I wanted to make this movie. The feature version of this film is actually getting released March 15th. Its premiere is in London. It's going to get a theatrical distribution in London to start with, and then we're working out details for Canadian and U.S. Distribution as we speak. So it's called Dirty Oil, and you can go on the web link that I posted a little while ago on Bubblegum's website, and it's a very strong piece about the oil sands issues up there in greater detail, and then we come to the U.S. and follow the pipelines down to the U.S. and the impacts it's having on the Great Lakes here. So keep an eye out for it, and maybe we'll do another webinar down the road with that film. Thanks, everyone.
Did you have one last pressing question, Louis St. Laurent?
Yeah, I just have a really quick question. How much is in a barrel? I really don't know.
George, I'm not sure if you know that. Is it 90 gallons? I'm not sure. Oh, okay. I'd like to thank everyone for participating and sticking with us. And your support wherever you live is extremely important. Canada does not look good overseas, and unfortunately the government would have us believe that they are actually a whole lot better than what they are. I am a family physician. I have absolutely nothing to gain by what I'm doing. I will continue to do what I'm doing in whatever respect I'm needed. But my eyes have been opened, and I have, I guess, gained a new role in this world and what I'm doing. Myself and my wife and all my kids are involved. And I continue to harass government, if that's the right word. I would love to participate in the next webinar now that I've got the hang of the microphone and the keyboard, and that's great on computer. And hopefully we can make that happen. And thanks again.
Thank you to everyone for coming and participating, and especially to Leslie Iwerks, Dr. John O'Connor, George Porteous, and Andrew Nikiforuk for presenting and answering questions. We at the Safe Drinking Water Foundation are definitely open to any future webinars or future webinar ideas that anybody has, so they can email me at info@safewater.org. That includes the presenters as well, of course, if they have any ideas. And please visit our website. You can see other previous webinar videos on our website by going to webinars, webinar videos. Don't hesitate to email me if you have any questions. And I hope everybody has a great day. Thank you again for participating.
Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you.